Hey, hey, good people. Well, we have successfully explored the topic of social inequality, or I should say, systems of power and inequality in society. And if you reflect back on several weeks ago, we looked at that based on race, ethnicity and religion, gender, sexuality, capitalism, and social class. So this week, we are moving into a new topic. And we're going to break, just as we did previously, we're going to break this topic down into specific areas. And the topic that we're going to be looking at now is social institutions and other social issues. So to begin this, we're talking about institutions and issues. We're going to be looking at this from a macro perspective. Okay, so I need you to be mindful of that. Think back when we were or I should say, when you had intro to sociology, when we speak about the macro perspective of the sociological paradigm, the paradigm that we would be looking at would be structural, functional, and social conflict. That's going to be our macro perspective. The structural, functional, again, the bits and pieces that kind of come together and create a system that functions or creates the system's norms that kind of lay the foundation with social interaction. And then social conflict, be mindful, good folks, when we say social conflict, we are speaking about the inequality. And I think that we've done a pretty good job of exploring that in previous chapters previous weeks, and looking at the issues of race, class, gender, sexuality. So we're going to continue exploring social inequality and social structural functional perspectives. So this week, our sorry, I had a brain cramp. Our articles that we're going to be looking at, the very first article is entitled, this is written by William Julius Wilson, and this article is entitled Jobless Ghettos, the Social Implications of the Disappearance, of Work in Segregated Neighborhoods. It's a pretty long title, y'all. Yes, it is. But what do you get out of that title? When you start reading this, again, I want you to have a clear perspective on your experiences, maybe the way that you grew up, some of the neighborhoods that you were raised around or even in. This particular article, what they're looking at is not just the disparity in income and not just looking at inner city joblessness, but they're looking at the high rate of not just poverty, but what does that high rate of joblessness, what does that do? And how does that impact the way a community functions? How does that impact, when we bring it down to symbolic interaction, how does that impact the way people see themselves within that community? Excuse me. So one of the things that I found really interesting in reading this article is when the author began to look at how the inner city youth saw themselves and how they began to identify themselves. So when we think about and we begin to discuss the issue of joblessness in an inner city neighborhood, there's several issues that we want to be mindful of. Not only how the system feeds into the issue or the problem of joblessness, and also which leads to poverty, but also how are the people within the community, how do they view themselves? And what does it mean to them when they're living in a community when there is such a high rate of joblessness? One of the links that I'm going to put, or that I should say that is loaded into this module, is just a brief clip from the movie The Hate U Give. Not sure if you all had an opportunity to view that movie, but it is definitely a good movie to watch that touches on many, many intersectional issues dealing with race, with class, and with sexuality. So definitely, if you have an opportunity to look at the movie in its entirety, I encourage you to do so. But there's just a small clip that's in the module that focuses on, how the youth within an inner city, how they view their community, how they view themselves when they're looking at and when you're talking about this high rate of joblessness and what that looks like for the community. All right, so our second article that we're going to be talking about. The second article is written by Jennifer Silva, and this article is entitled Working Class Growing Pains. Ooh, ooh, ooh. The Working Class Growing Pains. I can remember when I was a little girl, when folks said that they were in the working class, that actually meant something. That even though you were in the working class, there were still many opportunities for you to live and to achieve the American dream. So people were still able to purchase homes. People were still able to purchase cars, and live a comfortable life. Well, what does the working class look like in our generation today, in the current generation? I think it's safe to say that it has definitely changed significantly. So this author, when we're talking about working class growing pains, she is exploring again the historical perspective of what the American dream looked like and how we define that, and being defined in the symbols that equated to the American dream, meaning that you had home ownership, that you had a nice car, that your family was it was very successful. But what does that look like today when we talk about the growing pains of the working family? And how does that come down to, and how does it impact the way that folks see themselves trying to achieve the American dream? When we are assessing and exploring how folks may see themselves in an attempt to achieve the American dream, we got to take a step back and we got to ask ourselves, what kind of emotional toll is this taking on people when they are not successful in achieving the American dream? Do they blame themselves? Do they see themselves as not being equipped or capable of making it to achieve the American dream? Or is there something within the system? Ooh, 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 ooh. Come on, good people. Let's not always be so quick to blame the victim. Is there something within the system that is prohibiting some from achieving the American dream? So that's what that article is going to be exploring. All right. So the third article that we're going to be talking about and that we're going to be reading, we have two authors that wrote this article, and I'm not going to try to pronounce their last names because I don't want to butcher them, so I'm going to remain respectful of that. And let me just tell you the title of the article. It is, Are Emily and Greg More Employable Than Lakeisha and Jamal? Oh, no, they didn't. Yes, they did. They went there. These folks did they did a social experiment in wanting to check out and to explore the employability and the power, shall we say, behind a name, and the way that employers, the way that people who are in the position of hiring, how they begin to assess and have predetermined thought processes about folks simply based on their name. Now, in doing this, these researchers, they did create fictitious jobs, and so they had a whole process. And this is, I will say this to you, that this article is a little lengthy, but it is worth the read. I promise you that. So please take the opportunity to read this article and see what the results are that they came up with in this study, and looking at the name of an applicant and the outcome of employment for them. All right, y'all. So the fourth article for this week, it is written by Sandra Wissinger. And the title of this article is Gender Matters, So Do Race and Class, Experiences of Gendered Racism on the Walmart Shop Floor. So this article is all focused around, and it's all addressing a class action lawsuit against Walmart, and looking at and exploring all of the various intersectional isms that were on display in this within this Walmart class action suit. This was Dukes versus Walmart, I believe. And so the thing that this author wanted to point out, and what she was looking at excuse me, is not just the class action lawsuit, but the entire atmosphere, the environment of discriminatory actions that were taking place based on intersectionality against women. So looking at women, women of color, looking at women and their social class. And so they're exploring in this article that lawsuit and the different elements that that came with this, that are attached to this lawsuit. So this one also is a very, very interesting read, good people. So I do encourage you to make sure that you read through that article in its entirety. All right, y'all. So we have some discussion board posts that are up for you. There are, or I should say, there is a journal article or journal assignment for you for this week as well. All right. So if you have any questions, comments, or concerns, get a hold of me by email or by phone. So I bid you at this point in time, love, peace, and soul. And I will catch y'all on the discussion post.